Hello, friends and listeners. Today's episode is with Adam Robinson. Adam is the famed best-selling author, co-founder of Princeton Review, one of the leading advisors to hedge funds, some of the largest family offices and financial institutions in the world. He's also a rated chess master. He's also just a phenomenally clear thinker with a lot of insight to share on so many aspects of life. And today's episode was so good that we made it a two-parter. In the first part, we talk about a whole host of things that I think every listener is going to find fascinating. From red teaming, the concept of red teaming your idea, to a study that and what that means, to a study that he did in 1995 on high school students that showed what is the optimal psychology and confidence level for, in their case, it was for success on tests like the SAT, but this was a really interesting study that has oriented his thinking on the right mindset going into any task. And what the data objectively showed was the best mindset of going into a task and what are the factors that contribute to that. We also talk about logic and where logic falls short. A quote that is just still rolling around in my head from the episode is, "You're not thinking," and it's a quote that he thinks about pretty often. And it goes, paraphrasing, "You're not thinking deeply, you're just being logical." And that quote in many ways is an antidote to just going with a logical, conventional thought process, but instead saying that's not good enough and pushing yourself to think deeper. Such a great distinction from what we conventionally think is the virtue of logic versus the virtue of truly, deeply thinking. Well, you can tell that Adam is a deep thinker about 15 minutes into this episode. So without further delay, let's get into it. This is part one with Adam Robinson, and this is Below the Line. Adam, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, James, look at that face. Uh-oh.
My arms are raised, and yeah, look at this face. I actually, for listeners, you should check out our new YouTube channel. You can see the sunburn that's across my face. I look like Rafiki has marked me. So thank you for not calling that out. But yes, the face is also smiling because I've been looking forward to this conversation for several weeks. And
Faces.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do it. And real quick, you're in West Hollywood now. I saw that on your Twitter. I see the backyard is not Manhattan. When did that move from Manhattan to LA happen?
So I'm going to give you the mini version because
Sure.
we'll probably touch on this in a larger sense. I spent my whole adult life in Manhattan since leaving graduate school, and I was born in Manhattan even though I didn't grow up there. And so I was there, and most of it in Tribeca, like Lower Manhattan, near, and in 9/11, literally I was 5 blocks from, like, if the tower had fallen over this way,
Wow.
I wouldn't be talking to you. And there was a lockdown. Not many people realize this, that everyone in Tribeca, the neighborhood, was forced evacuated. We couldn't stay there. We were forced out of our homes for several months. Like, the world went on, but we were forced out of our homes. And even when we were allowed back in, there were checkpoints, like Checkpoint Charlie. You had to show proof that you lived in that neighborhood. And that day, 9/11, 20 odd years ago, right? The island of Manhattan was shut down. The bridges, you couldn't cross the bridges. The tunnels were shut, and that's so seared in my mind. I made a resolution: I will never be trapped in Manhattan during a lockdown. And last March, I happen to be in LA. I come here a lot, and it was clear lockdown was imminent, not total like martial law lockdown, but still, again, last year, about a year ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I'm not going to be on that island, because it's an island, literally an island, right? So I'm not going to be there. So I've been here ever since.
Oh, wow.
And which is very strange.
Yeah, how's that last year been?
Well, strange just because I actually feel nomadic and homeless. And I say that because that's the world right now. Everyone, wherever you are, there's a kind of unreality that this isn't, even if you've lived wherever you live, this isn't home. All of us have a kind of, Wizard of Oz, like this isn't Kansas, even if you're in Kansas, right?
Right.
And so yeah, and I think this is a theme we'll keep coming back to, this notion of home, reality. What do we know? Where's bedrock? Because the ground is shifting under all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know people think things are going to get back to normal, but no, we're going to find out today in our conversation. There's normal was never sustainable. We're not going back to that. In fact, that normal is what got us here. We don't want to go back to that. Anyway, so lots to talk about. So you thought that was an instant, like, oh, you're in West Hollywood, but no, so everything is layered.
Well, in that you mentioned Wizard of Oz, I've heard you also mention in conversations that, and I think it's usually referring to the market, but that it's a Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland type of world.
Yes.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So in that vein, how would you describe, you mentioned that a few years ago before COVID, but now it does feel like it is the patterns that were strange and hard to maybe put together that created a Wonderland world in the markets. To what you just said, it's a Wonderland world for all of us, or a wizard, a Wizard in Oz, or kind of the we're not in Kansas anymore type of world for all of us. Did you mean that in a Wonderland world in terms of the markets?
I meant that literally. So, people
tell
forget.
me more.
Right. So, Alice in Wonderland was written by Lewis Carroll, who was an Oxford Don. And Alice drops down the rabbit hole and discovers this bizarre world, and I know that, this is one of my things that don't make sense, things that don't make sense, right? One of, Adam's core themes, core lenses to understand the world, not just to understand it, but to navigate it, right? As whether as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as anything. And so she drops down this rabbit hole, and the inhabitants of that world, perfectly fine, but whoa, the laws of gravity don't work. The laws of syntax don't work. She encounters all these bizarre creatures, and first she's small, then she's big, and she's bewildered. She got to somehow orient herself within this bizarre world. And my point has always been that that's reality. Wonderland is literally reality. We just don't realize it. And it's a lot like, not to switch metaphors, because I want to come back to Wonderland, The Truman Show, right? You remember that Jim Carrey movie?
Right.
And so Jim Carrey is in this fantasy land. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know it. And the rest of the real world is watching the show. Oh, poor, like kind of an innocent, he doesn't realize he's in a show. But actually the viewers were in just as bizarre a reality. They just didn't realize it. Right? They didn't realize it. And so I refer to this in a tweet about a year ago. I said this, people will look back at this time right now, the last year, as the great rupture. A rupture, like eruption, an eruption with the past, and really a waking up to reality. And I would tell you, this is really hard for people to grasp unless they've experienced it. But I promise you that what people think is going on, and that's you, myself, everybody, is not actually what's going on. Not actually what's going on. And I can demonstrate that in really tangible. Actually, I know most of your audience, these are founders, right? And so all of us in our domains, we think, well, we may not know the whole world, but within our domain, we got a pretty good grasp of it, right?
Right.
So this shocked me. Hold on, let me give you this was the summer, it's 4 years ago. It was the summer of 2017. Summer of 2017. And this was just so people get a reference point. We're 6 months into the Trump administration, right? And the market is melting up, just melting up, right? And I, for those who don't know, I advise some of the top hedge fund heads in the world, just on global markets through my lens, my way of looking at markets, which is all investors in the world try to make sense of the world, right, through whatever lens it is. They're trying to make sense of that world, and they believe that if they make better sense of that world than everybody else, they'll make better investment decisions. Right. And it sounds reasonable, right?
It's actually but it's a little profound in that you think investing is making money, but to what you're saying and to what I've seen, it is you have to make sense of the world. It's not buy low, sell high. It is a lot of sense making.
Well, yes and no. We'll come back to that. I don't want to layer too many parentheses on this, but so what I do is I don't try to make sense of the world. I make sense of everybody else's making sense of the world. So I front run them. I figure out what they're going to figure out before they figure it out, right? Anyway, so the market's melting up, and a number of my clients, these are, again, very sophisticated investors, top tier. And a number of them said, hey, Adam, what's with the euro dollar? Why does it keep going higher? Now, for those of you who don't know, the euro dollar is the exchange rate between the US and Europe. It's kind of one of the few key variables in the world, one of the most important, like the dollar, interest rates, it's like for a doctor, it's like your blood pressure, your heart rate, a couple things. And so you really got to understand that. What's going on with the dollar, right? So this will blow your mind, whether or not you care about markets. And I say this again, just as an illustration. So anyway, they said, what's up with the euro dollar? Why does it keep going higher? And I had a hunch. So I said, well, why don't I come in? We'll talk about the euro dollar. And so I went into, this is separate conversations, but they're all pretty much identical to this. So I said, so they said, so Adam, thanks for coming in. What's up with the euro dollar? And I said, well, I'm going to answer that, but first I have a couple questions. I said, sure, what? I said, US interest rates, 10-year yields, are they higher or lower year to date? So like January 2nd, 2017 to June, just middle of the year. I said, are they higher or lower year to date? And each of them said, come on, they're higher. What's your point? I said, okay. So US interest rates, 10-year yields from the beginning of the year to now, higher. Yeah, come on, we want to talk about the euro dollar. I said, okay, we're going to give it. Okay, let's put that aside. Pop quiz number 2, question number 2. Bund yields, German 10-year yields, are they higher or lower year to date? And they said, lower. Avi, like, which come on, the euro dollar, kind of busy here, Adam. Let's get to the point. I said, okay, before we talk about the euro dollar, could you just pull up your Bloomberg? You just pull up 10-year yields? Let's just take a look at them. Okay. So they pull up on their Bloomberg and they look at the screen, each one of them, they look at the screen, they go, well, I'll be damned, 10-year yields are lower. Remember, they were sure they were higher. I went, yeah. I mean, they were really mystified. Again, this is a key in your economic decision-making. I don't care whether you're in VC or investing or trading or anything. You better know the interest rates and where they're headed. These are some of the top guys in the world who knew U.S. interest rates had moved higher. They had moved lower. That's really shocking. And they were so really kind of just mystified. Like, wow. Remember before you said Bund yields, German Eurozone yields had moved lower? You still think that? I said, well, yeah. I mean, they must be really low because, I thought U.S. interest rates are high. They're down. So Bund yields must be much lower. I said, okay, let's pull up the Bund 10-year yields. Let's check that out. And they did. And now they were really stunned because they looked at the screen and they said, oh, they're higher. I said, yeah. And they really were speechless, each one of them, because the world was exactly the opposite of what they knew to be true. They knew, they didn't even bother to question it. And really at that point, what they should have said to me, by the way, the world was interest rates in the States and in Europe, both were the exact opposite. They thought they were like this, but they were like this, which explained why, it was my hunch, why they were mystified by the euro dollar. The euro dollar was doing the opposite of what they knew it had to do, because interest rates, they just they didn't bother to check. And not one of them, what they should have said, each should have said, Adam, I think we got to end the meeting here. Because if I'm wrong about that, I have no idea what else I'm wrong about, right? If I was wrong about something as basic as that, what else don't I know in the world? On this theme of Wonderland, Ray Dalio,
brilliant investor, yeah.
One of the greats, mind, wow, and runs a Bridgewater. On November 6, 2019, he writes a blog piece entitled, The World Has Gone Mad and the System is Broken. This is pre-COVID. Think about that, right? One of the great investors ever, and thinkers about markets, thinkers about life, saying, the world has gone mad. That means we're in Wonderland. And that was pre-COVID. And yet we keep thinking things are going to go back to normal, and they're not. And the key thing is for everybody to recognize that. And, I've said this a number of times, the hardest thing about investing, and the hardest thing just really kind of in life, is just to see what's going on. Just to see it. Because so many people go, we're in one, it doesn't make any sense. This is crazy. But they don't reorient themselves, right? Think about it. We're in a world, Wonderland. We had negative interest rates. I'm sure you studied Econ 101 in college, and, I went to Wharton. I don't ever remember hearing about negative interest rates. And then we had negative oil prices last year on April 23rd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, we had a print and settle price of $36.73 a barrel. Oh, if you had a barrel, they'd pay you to take it away. Please take our oil. We'll pay you to take our oil off our hands. Mm-hmm. And what people don't do is they go, wow, they just go, oh, that's bizarre. Well, it's proof we live in Wonderland, right? And if that's true, what else don't we know?
Right.
Really? We just assume those are kind of anomalies, isolated anomalies. Oh, no, they're not isolated whatsoever. There are other anomalies that we haven't discovered yet, right?
Right.
And
to the economist, it would be like they are in Wonderland and gravity has flipped. If you have negative prices for oil, and you either choose, okay, no, the model in my head is right, and this is Wonderland, this is a dream, this isn't real, this is an anomaly, and then gets couched away as like, no, that's just a strange anomaly. Yeah, also negative interest rates, that's also a strange anomaly, but that doesn't fit the model, so I'm going to choose the model versus, to what you're saying, updating the quote-unquote model so completely that you're basically saying this is a completely different world, and those aren't isolated anomalies. Those are signs that there is no normal that we're likely going back to. This is, everybody needs to update their models.
So, there's certain truths, like businesses succeed by satisfying human needs, and those that really succeed do so efficiently, and so there's certain truths in life that's just not going to change. But to see the world for what it is, and not be blinded by your preconceptions and your models of the world. And you can always tell when your model of the world, when you're not seeing reality, is you'll go, that's weird, or that doesn't make any sense, or okay, yeah, they're negative, but it'll go back to normal soon enough. Like, no, they don't. And see, really, it's so important to see clearly. But that's what we're at. We're in Wonderland. We've always been in Wonderland. We just didn't know it. We've always been in the Truman Show. The thing is, the people watching the Truman Show, they were in an unreality too. They just didn't know it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
what are some of those truths that are the through line from 5 years ago, 50 years ago to today? And what are the untruths that you'd say this is absolutely no longer, part of the model?
Oh gosh, we're going to touch on so many of those, today. But since your audience is primarily founders, entrepreneurs, but of course we're talking about life here, right? This is way beyond just is to sort of do an inventory of things that were true pre-COVID, like true, say, in 2019, and if anything, have only accelerated since then. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example. Here's a truth: the need for human connection, right? Mm-hmm. Feel connected. And so two trends that were in place pre-COVID and have only accelerated now are, this both begin with P: pet ownership and plant ownership. So pre-COVID, 2019, in fact, pet ownership was going through the roof. Why? Because people were lonely. Fewer people getting married, or delaying marriage, right? Fewer feelings of isolation, and plants. I'm going to take care of plants, and more staying at home and you want plants around you, just, and COVID just accelerated that, and so, here's something that people should do is scenario analysis, scenario planning. So in, I think it was 1974, there was an oil embargo, and you're too young, before your time. One oil company in the world made money during the oil embargo. It was Royal Dutch Shell. Why? It was kind of like, remember Forrest Gump with the Bubba? You saw that movie, right? Forrest Gump, right?
Oh, of course.
There's only one boat that made it through
that storm, right?
That storm, right? By luck or divine providence, but right. And so, so one oil company made it through the embargo storm, Royal Dutch Shell. And why? Because they had run scenario plannings of all these different possibilities. And embargo was one of them. So when the embargo hit, they just pulled the scenario off their shelf. They had already run through it. They knew exactly what to do, right? And so as entrepreneurs, as investors, we should all do run through scenarios, especially ones that couldn't possibly happen, right? Because we're in Wonderland now, right? So just pick a scenario. What happens if oil prices go to 1,000? Like, oh, that could never happen, Adam. Okay, then you better run through the scenario, right? What happened?
It reminds me of, I built a payments company for 5 years, and we learned in the security profession to do red teams. So you build out literally a team to hack your own system, and you just say, okay, you 4 engineers spend 2 weeks just trying to hack it, and you're incentivized to hack it, and figure out socially hack it. Spoof an email to me asking for verification on X or Y, and the leadership. Most of the leadership, one of the CTO knew, but the rest of the leadership wouldn't know when this would happen during the year. And it was so brilliant. In fact, I've used it in subsequent companies. Right now I've got a little matcha energy shot company, Magic Mind, for listeners. Check it out.
You're so Santa Monica.
I am so Santa Monica. Wait. God. I'm dripping.
Is that an Erewhon?
Actually, Erewhon is trying to. So Erewhon wants to put it in the shelves, but we are still D2C, so still e-commerce right now. We haven't gone into retail, but that will be one of the first spots we get into. Which, yes, Santa Monica. In my head, I was like, man, that's success if we can get into Erewhon. But the interesting thing was that planning then went into. Each year we do that for a tiny little 5-person, only one full-time employee, 5-person company, where one of the big things that we had to do this year, and obviously the pandemic really stretched the imagination. We were doing everything from like, okay, what if there's a global shortage on cardboard? And these are very likely actually, or at least in the realm of that's pretty easy to imagine with the spike in e-commerce and probably dwindling supplies, but all of those things, to exactly what you're saying, then they lead to some very creative thinking, but more than that, they lead to, and I'm not saying we've done this phenomenal as well as the Royal Dutch Shell, but it leads to this Excel spreadsheet where I can sleep at night knowing that we have 47 different scenarios planned out that could go wrong that I did not have in previous companies.
So a few things. It was Eisenhower who said, in battle, plans are useless, but the act of planning was indispensable.
Right.
You used the phrase red teaming, and I'm sure you've used it before in your podcasts and stuff, and most people are familiar, but if you're not, red teaming is when you you set up sort of a devil's advocate, like they sort of attack the premise or the assumptions, and wow, in 1936, DuPont went red teaming one better. You'll love this. So the CEO of DuPont at the time, I think it was still a family member, Bob DuPont the second, or
John Q. DuPont.
Pierre DuPont, whatever, I forget, but one of the still founding family members. And so DuPont back in the 30s, their chief genius was this chemist named Carruthers. Basically, he single-handedly was coming up with everything. And so one day he runs into the CEO's office and says, I got this new synthetic fiber. I forget what he called it, some long, chemist type name, like polycarbonate, blah, 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 which they renamed nylon. They had other synthetic fibers. But this was revolutionary, because this one, and the CEO realized, oh my gosh, this is a game changer, right? What do you think he did? I'm just asking you, what do you think he did?
You'd imagine, well, actually knowing how you do SAT, or you found out the SAT prep hack, I will not go with the conventional answer. The conventional answer would be like, this is a game changer. Let's start producing the hell out of it. So what I imagine he did something smarter.
Well, of course he did that. And he set up a division, mind you, put nylon out of business. Because he wanted the next gen. He knew all of his competitors would be doing that. So not only is he we're going to use this is game changer, and we're already jumping ahead to the replacement for nylon. He didn't wait for a competitor to replace it. He set up a whole division. Your job, put nylon out of business, because we want to own nylon and we want the replacement, right? So that's red teaming to a whole nother degree.
Right.
Don't just critique nylon.
Yeah.
No, put it out of business. And of course, nylon's still used, but he wanted whatever would come out of that, right? He wanted to own that too, not his competitors, right? So same thinking, but to a whole nother degree. And, I don't know, but Elon Musk is this kind of guy, right? I'm sure Elon Musk internally has teams replace my car, just whatever it is they come up with, because he wants to own that too. I'm sure he's got, skunk work teams doing stuff like that. Well, and in today's world, you better. You gotta.
Well, you mentioned in a recent tweet, you mentioned something along the lines of, in chess, there is, it's not just about protection, but it's overprotection, protection on the protection. And as a chess master, do you mind walking me through that tactical, but also metaphorical approach of overprotection and where you've seen in life where, you protected it, but shit, that was under protection.
So in chess, because even if you're, super chess genius, top grandmaster, you make mistakes, right? Buffett and Munger have talked a lot about this throughout their lives. Munger said famously, it's amazing how much mileage Warren and I have gotten, not by being smart, but just not being stupid. It's so hard to be right. It's harder not being stupid than it is to be smart. And so because chess masters can't think too far ahead, then certain key things they overprotect. So in NASA terms, they have different hierarchies of components, say on a rocket launch. some components, if they fail, it's bad. But some they fail, the mission is over. If there's any people up there, they're not coming back. And so they have this notion of mission critical and, I think it's critical and mission critical, like life critical. And so for the just critical, they have a backup system. But for the mission critical, they have a backup for the backup. Mm-hmm. And sometimes a triple backup, right? So the backup has a backup and the backup's backup has a backup.
And I imagine they have training with the NASA astronauts for this is what you do if all backups fail. There's at least still some training.
Okay, we better not get that far. So speaking of which, so overprotection, you love this story. So Guy Kawasaki, one of the original marketing director of Apple back in the day, and a great entrepreneur, great mind and soul, great dude, was telling me, gosh, this is about 15, 20 years ago. He always religiously backed up computer files, right? So he had, so on his desktop, he backed up everything to his laptop, right? Okay, that's protecting. Right? And backup system number one, my laptop. Mm-hmm. And then he also backed up to CDs every once in a while. Remember this kind of, we had small hard drives. He backed up to a CD. And then he backed up to the web, right? This wasn't cloud back then, but there was some web backup in the early days. There's some web backup services. So get this. He said, Adam, he was moving or something, as I recall. So in his car, he had his desktop and his laptop and the CDs in the car. And I forget, either the car got stolen or something, but all of them were lost. Like, don't put your backups together.
Right.
And the only way, he said, Adam, the only reason I saved all my files is I had backed it up to the web, right? So that's overprotection, mm-hmm. right? So, in these days where, globally supply lines, we got real trouble on the horizon, right? It's not on the horizon, it's here. Mm-hmm. And you got to assume, any key components, you better have a backup. And that backup, you better have a backup, mm-hmm. right? Here's a simple scenario. You go, well, I got a backup. I got a factory, in Ohio or whatever. Yeah, I got a backup. Normally I get my key component from abroad, but I got a plant in Ohio that, so you got a backup, right? Okay, how about this scenario? The overseas supplier you're cut off from, right? So are all the other people in the States who are relying on that. And they may go to that same supplier in Ohio who now can't service everybody. Mm-hmm. And the thing you thought protected you, oh no, you're not protected whatsoever. I talked about this a couple days ago. People, when they're investing, trading, they have stop losses. Right? So they bought something at 100, they put in a stop loss 95, right? To kind of lock in. If it falls more than 5%, that's all I'm willing to take. I'm out. And of course, as the stock goes higher, they can move that stop loss higher, right? Trailing stop. And I think, okay, I'm protected. Maximum loss, 5%. So they wake up one morning and the stock is gapped down 50%. And they discover, I didn't get filled. No, it gapped down. There were no buy orders, 5%. The next buy order is 50%. You're now looking at a 50% loss. And you thought maximum loss is 5% because I'm protected. You got to overprotect, run through these scenarios. And, the red teamers even have to think, what couldn't possibly happen?
We did not predict the global pandemic. That is for sure.
Yeah, and right now, okay, here's a scenario you got to run through. What happens if the vaccines don't protect against the variants, right? You got to run through that scenario. It's so easy for public government officials to assure us we see no evidence that that's going to happen. Well, as entrepreneurs, we don't do that. We don't go, we're sure that that's not going to happen. We have to plan for the eventuality, right? Because we have money on the line, or our investors' money on the line, right? If we're, and just as fiduciaries, we don't take those risks. I mean, we can't assure our investors, I'm for sure that's not going to happen. Oh, good luck.
Well, in my prior founder lives, I remember being so overly optimistic that it's okay. We've jumped through a few hoops. I think we are lucky. I think we are this lucky ship in the storm, and that's it's a dangerous thought because I've lived through it. And as soon as you start thinking that, you aren't the lucky ship anymore. But you actually have some interesting experience within being the co-founder of Princeton Review and SAT prep. You actually have some interesting data and experience around the best psychology for achievement, or the best psychological approach, at least when it comes to the SAT. Do you mind walking listeners through the different students and the right psychologies, or the optimal psychology for a better score?
Absolutely. So this is really fascinating because it's counterintuitive. So people think it's important to be confident. Yay. No, actually. And I can prove it. So this is a study I did, 25 years ago. And which is really, it's really important to share. You'll see. This is with implications far beyond everything we're talking about. So in New York City, there's a test to get into the specialized science high schools.
That's right. Yeah, not SAT, but.
Right. Yeah. But wait, this also applies to SATs. It applies to testing in general. Okay. So I'm going to give you the most mind-blowing study I ever did. This is real-time actual students, because it goes to actually, you'll see, to entrepreneurial success and such. So this occurred in 1995. So again, the specialized science high school is in New York. The most famous is Stuyvesant High School. On the old SAT scale, Stuyvesant's average SAT is higher than Harvard's, as just to put a data point there. Mm-hmm. And you have to take a test to get in. So that's the top three: Stuyvesant, and then Bronx High School of Science, and then Brooklyn Tech, the top three. And but Stuyvesant is at the top, then Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech. And so to get into those schools, you have to take a test. And 30,000 kids sit for the test. Again, it's one shot on a Saturday morning. And if your score is high enough, basically, it is rank all the students on the test that one Saturday morning. And the top 700, they get offered admission to Stuyvesant. The next 1,000 Bronx Science, and then Brooklyn Tech. And again, to put a frame of reference, I don't know exactly, but I'm willing to get 20 or 30 Nobel laureates from those schools over the years. I'm probably higher than that, but that's how top tier it is. And so in 1995, the Board of Education in New York announced that they were going to start preparing disadvantaged students, inner city kids, for the test. Test prep. And I had long since left the test prep field, right? And I saw my interest in the Princeton Review. I was out of that field. And again, 30,000 kids take the test. Of the kids at Stuyvesant back then, about 80% were Asian, 80%. And by Asian, I include India, Pakistan, and about 90% were first or second generation in the States. Some were born here, some had even just come over, right? So 30,000 kids, 35,000 kids sit for a test that only the top 10% are going to get offered admission to one of these schools. And all the kids taking the test are already
vetted to be brilliant, right?
Already prepped, right? That's I say that way by background. Mm-hmm. And the principal of Stuyvesant said, Adam, there are prep courses for the STI test in Hong Kong. Got to let that land. I'm not talking about Chinatown. I'm saying to get into Stuyvesant, this is 1995, there were courses being offered in Hong Kong. So kids in Hong Kong would prep for the test, fly over for that Saturday morning, take the test, and fly back to Hong Kong. And then if they got in, they'd move in with, an uncle or whatever. And so that's how competitive it was. It's even more competitive now. Anyway, so you understand all that. And even if you're not interested in education, I'm about to blow your mind. So they wanted to prepare, 80% Asian, 15% white, but even that was mostly Russian immigrants, mm-hmm. and some very, upper middle class, families who had prepped their kids to take this test, and then 5% Black and Hispanic, and they wanted to boost minority enrollment. And when she told me, Adam, there are prep courses in Hong Kong, I thought, wow. If you aren't prepped, you don't have a chance. You just don't have a chance. Okay, again, I know I've gone on this. This is very cool I'm about to share. Yeah. So, and it goes to confidence and more. And my confidence is actually, I don't know if you want to be confident. Anyway, you'll see why in a bit. So I volunteered pro bono to set up the course. Said, I'll set it up, I'll create the curriculum, and I'll train the teachers. I don't have the time to do it, but this is such an important, worthy cause. So I'm donating my, for the city. Mm-hmm. They said, great. So the first cohort of students, we got 2/3 of our kids into one of the schools, which was extraordinary. Now, I had no say in the kids who were selected for the program. The test ran from 0 to 100, right? And you had to get into STI, you had to get an 85-ish. Bronx Science was about 75, Brooklyn Tech 65. And I know people listening to this think, I don't really care. Again, you're gonna see what's gonna come up. The average starting score for the kids in the program was in the high 20s. We had to get them up at least to 65. Think about that. Think of the Gulf State. So the kids selected for the program were all good kids, but they weren't the academic superstars that would have been a lot easier to get them, Anyway, so that was extraordinary. Great success. I would say of the students, we had the first cohort was about 300 kids.
Wow, so you got 200 in.
Yeah, yep. Which was extraordinary. Now, in the program, which is way better than any, they expected, way. In the program, there were about 250 of the 300, 250 blacks and Hispanics, and about 30 whites and Asians. And the program was primarily designed to boost, they couldn't, for legal reasons, exclude non-minorities, but just by way of the way they selected by zip codes, that's what happened. Okay, so I was dismayed because when I looked at the numbers of the kids who got in, and again, extraordinary improvements, like from the high 20s, we got 2/3 of them above 65. I mean, wow. I was dismayed because at comparable starting scores, say starting score 45, whites and Asians improved more within the program than blacks and Hispanics. And that bummed me out. Why was that happening? I had no idea. Again, at comparable starting scores, whites and Asians improved more. And then, so the program was a success, but I wanted everybody to improve, right? I certainly didn't want, though, the groups that we really wanted to help, because they had every disadvantage, right? To at least to be comparable, like great, everybody rise. So I created a super long questionnaire. This is where the punchline's coming up, of about, it was about 150 questions. And some of the questions were demographic, and each kid was going to fill out the survey for the next year. So questions like, how old are you? How many brothers and sisters do you have? I had to ask, are you male or female? Because a lot of times you couldn't tell from the name. Or I couldn't tell. And where were you born? Where was your mother born? Where's your father born? Your grandparents? What language do you speak at home? I had their 5th grade. You took the test in 7th grade. Wait, my bad. 8th grade for admission into high school the next year. I had their 5th grade math and reading scores as inputs. And then I asked psychological questions like this, which gets to this is so coming back to, I said, how do you rate your chances for getting into one of the schools, right? Again, confidence. Huh?
And this is before the program or after going through the program?
Before. Well, no, after, I got in, right? Right. This is before. So the next year, before the program started, I had all the kids. Well, I was just an advisor at this point, right? I said I would create the curriculum, set up, create the test, and then I kind of advise it. And so as to how do your parents rate your chances? And I wish going back, I had been a little more refined in that. I wish I had asked, how does your father rate your chances? And how does your mother? But I didn't. And I wish I had, because I'm going to blow your mind. So then, and then how do your teachers rate your chances? So again, some hard quantitative questions, like how old are you? Where in the pecking order, how many brothers older than you? And that's like, I checked every possible variable, including self-confidence, right? The number one positive factor for improvement was a father born in another country.
Interesting.
That was the number one. We're going to come back to that. So you're going to have lots of questions. You're going to, and you wanted your mother to be born here. The kids with that dynamic improved twice as much as the reverse. And again, I'm not talking about little teeny improvements. The whole cohort, like whopping improvements, right? Like improvement on steroids, so the father born in another country, mother born here improved twice as much. as the reverse. A mother born in another country, father born here. And they in turn improved twice as much as both parents born here. You really didn't want that. This is the mind-blowing thing. If your father was born in another country and your mother was born here, race dropped out as a factor. It's not a factor anymore, right? So if your father was born in another country, mother born here, whether you were Black or Asian didn't matter anymore. It was really, okay. And also the kids who improved the most by a whopping margin were kids who said, I don't think I'm gonna get in. My parents don't think I'm gonna get in, but my teachers think I'm gonna get in. By a whopping margin. I'm not talking about, 1% versus 1.2%. You got to let all that land. Race was not a factor. We had a president, as I recall, parent born in another country, right? And so why that father born in another country, mother born here? Why was that key? Because the father is the one who gives you the drive, kind of societal expectations. Damn straight you're going to pass that test. But you needed to have the language skills, and you get those from mom, which is why you needed your mother fluent in English, right? And again, in retrospect, if I'd stayed with that, I wish I'd asked, what language is spoken at home? I could have gotten more nuanced. But again, in terms of confidence, the kids who improved the most by a whopping margin were those who said, I don't have a chance. No way. And my parents don't think I have a chance. But my teachers do. Now, mind you, on some level, they believed they had a chance because they were showing up every Saturday for these sessions. This was not in school. They had to give up an afternoon after school every week and basically their entire summer. So I don't have a chance, but I'm showing up to practice every day. The key thing is so why was that key? And by the way, I've replicated
fascinating.
I've replicated that study in other domains. Oh, I had a question at the very beginning of the Princeton Review, because we did data science, big data analysis from the very beginning, tested everything. It wasn't even called big data then, because we were trying to squeak out do you remember that movie with Al Pacino, the football movie, Any Given Sunday?
Sunday, right? Yeah.
Sunday. And he has that stirring speech, football is a game an inch. Right? And those of you who haven't seen that movie, it's a great movie.
It is a good one.
It's a really good one, yeah. And so is life. And so is test improvement. Like to get a whopping big, every little decimal point improvement is key. And so anyway, I was always interested in improvement, right? That was my job, raise kids' scores. And so I was always surprised that I could never tell on any individual kid who was gonna who was gonna be the Tom Brady. I could never pick them out, and who was gonna underperform. So the average improvement was extraordinary. On the old SAT scale, wow, our average improvement on a 6-week course was about 179 points, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Back on it, right? A lot. The average improvement that they said was possible was 30. Our kids in a 6-week course, 6x that. Anyway, so one of the questions that was hugely predictive was this. I created another questionnaire. It's like 20 questions, and 2 were hugely predictive of improvement. Question number 1, how do you do on standardized tests like the SAT? You do better, compared to your classroom tests, like ordinary schoolwork. A, you do better because it's high stakes. You're a clinch hitter, right? You just come through. B, you do about the same. C, you tend to freak out. High improvers said C, I freak out. Think about that. We'll come back to that in a second. The other question was usually predictive was, true or false, when in doubt on a question, you should go with your first hunch. And the answer on standardized tests, the right answer is don't go with your first hunch on a standardized test, because the test is constructed to, hard questions are those by definition that nobody's hunch is going to be right. That's why it's a hard question. It's different from life. Anyway, so the reason that the high improvers, regardless of starting score, said I freak out. Think about the mindset of the kid who says that in the course. Help me. I need to improve. Versus the kid who says, I'm a pretty good test taker. I do better. Oh, then that kid is, he's not open to improvement. He already thinks he's a good test taker. He may be good, maybe even very good. I just know he's not going to improve.
That is so fascinating. And I'm mapping it to so many founder conversations in Silicon Valley dynamics. The immigrant parent and parents aspect, but also to what you're saying. It's almost like you're saying any confidence is overconfidence. You actually
So that's there's that great study called the Kruger-Dunning effect. I don't know if you know that, the Kruger right to course, And so that was done by a Cornell professor, one of his grad students, the study. And they asked people to rank their, on 4 different scales. One was verbal ability. One was sense of humor. I forget what the other 2 were.
All right. I'm so glad people value that. Great.
Yeah, it's a great study, right? I think it's one of the most cited studies in the last 30 years.
I actually didn't know the components of it. I know that it's more or less said the smarter you are, the more doubts you have, Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. But I didn't know the components of it.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the guy who said this. He said, the problem in the world is that the intelligent are full of doubts, and the stupid are full of confidence.
That is
that great line in Yeats's brilliant poem, The Second Coming. And he said, the best are full of doubt, and the worst full of conviction. And so that ability, by the way, to entertain doubt, the philosophy that's called fallibilism, what's his name? Feynman, all the great scientists, and you gotta be full of doubt, because that's the way you self-correct. Like, what am I doing wrong? Not what am I doing wrong? What can I correct here? Anyway.
Well, and to bring up Ray Dalio again, I remember him saying, if you're worried, you don't have to worry. If you aren't worried, you should be worried.
Yeah. That's, Andy Grove from Intel, right? Only the paranoid survive, his book, right? And so, and even Buffett and Munger, you cover your downside, the upside will take care of itself. And, but just cover your downside. Make sure that your downside is covered. And then you get serendipities, things happen. No, you get to rise as long as you don't fall. Anyway, so the Kruger-Dunning effect is, so they ranked them on these, they rated people on these various abilities. And then they gave them a test, right? For those, like, test sense of humor. I forget how they test it, like some jokes or something. And then they ranked people, and they discovered, people who ranked themselves really high in these abilities, they were really low. It was an inverse thing. And so they theorized, and it's true, to improve at anything, I don't care what it is, you need to be aware, especially self-aware. And so the people with low abilities lacked self-awareness, which is why they had low abilities, right? They did not have verbal ability, and they didn't have the self-awareness to realize that. So they didn't take steps to kind of correct it. right? Mm-hmm. Which is why the high improvers in the program back Stuyvesant kids, I'm not going to get in. No way. You can believe though, like they're working like, you read the stories of any of the greats. I'm thinking now of sports, and they outworked everybody. Bruce Lee, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. They were there on the court at 9, 10 o'clock at night, alone, shooting free throws. Go, hey, Larry, what you doing that for? You're already, one of the immortals. Yeah, how do you think I got here? Mm-hmm. So they're always working, always keenly aware of what their defects are or flaws and stuff. Now, having said that, you don't want to focus too much on those, because what we succeed on our strengths, right? Like Warren Buffett, probably not a very good singer. He's not working on that. He doesn't care. He's not working on his day trading either. He probably sucks at that because he knows what he does better than anybody. And he stays within that, their circle of competence. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you got to be, but so within your domain, if there's something you don't do well, as long as you stay focused on the things you do well, really on that. I forget the guy's name. This is some years ago. There was one of the great Chinese ping pong players had no backhand, and he's the best in the world. And everybody knew his backhand sucked. So let's hit him shots that are gonna. But every other shot was so good, and he's still the best in the world because and everybody knew what that weakness was, right?
Let's take a moment to show some love to the sponsors that are showering love on this podcast. And if you want to support the podcast, then you can go and check out our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Dover.com, which is it is the founder's best friend. I am so pumped about this company, this service, because it is doing for recruiting what Segment did for analytics. Instead of having to implement XYZ different analytics platforms, Segment was a layer on top of it. Dover is doing that for all of your recruiting tools and all your recruiting needs. So instead of having to learn this applicant tracking software, this 20 different ways of sourcing candidates, this Excel spreadsheet, all of these emails in your inbox going back and forth with different tools that you're using, you just have one brilliant, seamless, simple to use layer on top of all of them. Dover will even... and this sounds too good to be true, but it is one of the coolest things I've seen from any recruiting software. It'll even learn your pitch and do your phone screen interviews for you. Go to Dover.com to check it out. Like I said, it is a founder's best friend. Every one of my portfolio founders, their biggest need is recruiting. And when you get down to it, it's also the efficiency around recruiting. Not just trying to fill the seats, but doing it in the most efficient way because, well, let's face it, you're a founder, you got a million things going on. And Dover is by far the most efficient way of recruiting. And Dover is the best tool I've seen in this space. So go check it out, Dover.com. All right. We are also brought to you by NetSwizzle. And I bet you heard about NetSwizzle, but you never heard about it like this. If you're a business owner, you might be making running your business way harder on yourself than necessary. Don't let QuickBooks or spreadsheets across a bunch of different files slow you down anymore. It's time to upgrade to NetSuite. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information that you need when you need it. I once heard a story that at Tesla, Elon Musk said that the one thing that they're going to be better in the world at than anyone else is that all of the engineers are going to be able to get the schematics for anything that they're looking for, any information they have within 60 seconds. They can find any information they want within 60 seconds. And the brilliance of that is time is money, and people waiting around 8 hours for information they need, the marketing department or the HR department being able to see exactly the information that they need instantaneously. Well, that's what NetSuite does. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSwizzle gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need all in one place, instantaneously. Not even 60 seconds. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite. Join over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how your business will benefit from what they've got to offer with a free product tour at netsuite.com/BTL for below the line. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/BTL. That's netsuite.com/BTL. I love this. Is for those listening, I'm smiling ear to ear because this is just such a fun conversation to have, because the wealth of knowledge knows no bounds with you, and the ability to connect to these various points. The one thing I wanted to ask, just to tie this at a bow, is did you notice that in yourself? Once you knew that fact, were you able to utilize that, or is that something that is almost transgenerational in the aspect that the other data says, okay, this is, because in some ways you could say that data seems to show achievement is transgenerational. There is something that happens, that you can't control from 0 to 12 to whatever eighth grade. That's one part of the question. If you believe that is true, that this is many years, many generations in the making for achievement.
Well, it's such a profound question. I'm going to say the short answer is no.
Okay.
Because really what it reflects is a mindset, right? It's not a race thing.
It's not even a cultural thing. If it was just one
exactly
father.
Think about the mindset of someone and everything involved with coming to another country.
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. That says a lot about whoever gets here. I don't want to get into the border thing right now, but to pick up and move to another country, I know a lot about that person, right? Overcoming a lot of hardship.
Several attempts even. I lived in South Africa for a few years, and I knew friends that attempted again and again and again and again to come here, and probably they had family members that attempted again. Mm-hmm.
Persistence, the willingness to take a chance, all those factors which play into being an entrepreneur, right? And a calculated chance, right? Think about that. And so that's a mindset, right? And that gets conveyed to your kids, and it's the mindset. And there's some seminal work done on which is on intelligence and the belief, choosing my words carefully, the belief in intelligence. How important is that to success, academic or otherwise? And I would tell you the belief in intelligence, super dangerous. Because if you believe intelligence, and I mean by that, most people think of intelligence as something fixed, right? I don't. But if you think of it as something fixed, like, oh, I'm born with a certain whatever, IQ, however you want to define it, I'm stuck with that. I personally don't believe that, but most people do. And then versus, hard work, and I say intelligence or talent, right? How much is talent key to success in any domain versus hard work, right? And of course, you need a certain amount of intelligence, a certain amount of talent, right? A certain amount of inborn. But if you believe that's key to success, you're screwed. Because as soon as you encounter difficulty, mm-hmm. and you will, and you believe that you're going to succeed or not on the basis of your talent, right? So your inborn stuff, what you got, you're screwed. Because, I'm encountering difficulty. That means that my talent, my intelligence is not sufficient. Mm-hmm. Plus, if you believe in intelligence and talent, you won't work hard. Because after all, I'm super smart. I don't need to. But if you believe that hard work is the key, then you're going to work your ass off. Mm-hmm. Right? And so that's really the key. I don't care what kind of talent you have. If you believe talent is going to get you to the top and keep you there, you're screwed, because you're not going to work nearly as hard as the guy who goes, I don't actually have that much talent. I have to work my butt off. You know, you look at Bruce Lee. Man, he was 5'7". He weighed, I don't know, 135, 140. Solid muscle. You wouldn't want to get into the ring with him, right? Because he outworked everybody. Whatever, I don't know, for sure, the fastest human ever recorded. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of Bruce Lee slowed down 10x. 10x, mind you.
Years ago, yeah.
Right, you see it's like they slow it down, and even at 10th speed, right? You like, wait, I didn't see his hand move, and the guy's down on the floor. And and all the greats, they just outwork everybody. Mm-hmm. I don't care. Anyway, so
putting you on the spot, you feel like it is a mindset thing.
It's total mindset.
And that gets us to the parenting around that aspect of someone that I recently just hired. He also in this zip code kind of blew my mind by saying he was told he was really smart, and he learned how tenuous that can be because you're going to meet tasks, exactly like you said, where smarts or intelligence are not going to get you over that obstacle. And he wished his parents had told him he was such a hard worker, but he remembers being the oldest. He was this ordained character. Shout out William for bringing this up. Literally on day one that he joined the company, he told me this, and just over conversation, and it was brilliant. It changed the way that I talk to my 3-year-old daughter. Start telling her that she's a hard worker, and not saying, "Oh, you're so smart."
Okay, since you're a proud dad, and I saw the way you smile when you mention your daughter, and so talk about mindset and experience, right? And again, it's not just intelligence, just a belief in talent. You know, I don't care. I'll take anyone in the world on the following debate. I assert that the best in the world at anything can't be the most talented. Cannot be. Because it was in not being the most talented that they had to develop superpowers to kind of compete, right? And so your daughter, what's her name?
Elle.
Oh, sweetie pie. So, golly. So back in Tribeca is a very sort of family-centric neighborhood in New York, trendy as it is. There was a little kids park on Saturday mornings. I used to like to go bring a book, and I got to watch the kids and their families, you know, and just muse on life. And so one particular Saturday morning, I noticed this little boy. He must have been max 5, like 4 or 5. And he was I'd say it was about half a football field, big, you know, but it had jungle gyms and, you know, nice lawn. You could have a blanket, have a picnic, sandboxes and things for kids and their parents. And there was also a perimeter of like a sidewalk perimeter of the thing internally, and it was fenced in, you know, so It's completely safe for everybody. And this one little boy, all on his own, he was walking around the perimeter. He had a skateboard under his arm. Like, it was bigger than he was. And he's walking around kind of proudly, all by himself. And I'm looking around the park because I don't see anyone paying any attention to him. And I'm sure his parents were there. Of course, you're not going to leave you. So he's walking around kind of proudly with his little skateboard. It wasn't little, it was as big as he was, right? Mm-hmm. And he put it down on the sidewalk. And I'm thinking to myself, he's not going to get on it, is he? And he did. And again, I'm looking around like, where's his mother or father? When are they going to run up to him? So he gets on the skateboard and he kind of goes a little back and forth, and the skateboard shoots out from under him and he falls to the ground. I wince, and he's laughing his head off. And he runs after the skateboard, puts it back under his arm, and like proudly walks around. And I thought, wow, you can be sure that his nanny wasn't watching him. No way a nanny would have would have allowed, if he breaks a bone, I'm in trouble.
Right.
And probably a dad, but maybe a mom. Yeah, if he breaks an arm, okay. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. This kid is fearless. Right? He did that several times. I watched each time, kaboom. He didn't know how to skateboard, but he thought he was skateboarding, and he's really proud. And that same day, I don't know, 15 minutes later-ish, I see a family, and I'm getting to U and L. I see a family and they're having a picnic, mom, a dad, and their daughter. And the daughter was at that age where she's just learning how to walk, right? And it's on the lawn, very soft lawn. They had a blanket, and the little girl kind of got to her feet, and then kind of took a step, and then kind of wobbled, because they really don't know how to do anything. And then, flip, she kind of go back on her diaper, Mm-hmm. And the father immediately ran to her a few feet and put her back up on her feet. And then she took another couple of steps, and her father picked her up, put her on her feet. And I thought, wow, you're teaching her literally, you cannot stand on your own 2 feet. Like, the contrast between the boy and the message was,
good luck.
You are self-reliant, kiddo. Mm-hmm. We're not, and that kid you knew, golly, I don't know, he's probably setting records somewhere now. It was a while ago. He's probably 25 or 30 even. And that little girl who was literally being taught, and there was no, right? She just went on the grass. Every kid learns how to walk. We're programmed, genetically, we can't help ourselves. You get up, try again. But that wasn't the message the dad was instilling in his daughter. And I'm sure he was a loving dad. And you'd think the mother would have said, yeah, hey, Charlie, fine. Mm-hmm. Let's enjoy our picnic.
Well, it's like breaking the cocoon for the butterfly. Don't do that, because that is it won't have the strength to fly.
You're right. They won't, and parents are so overprotective of their kids. And the kids, when I was growing up, oh man, I think of the number of things that I did, like, wow, I can't believe I'm alive, actually, that we just did. And I was with one of my best friends. I'm not gonna say who, but everybody knows it. And his son was like on his jungle gym doing stuff, and I was so scared. I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna like really fall and hurt himself. He's way up, like 15 feet up. But the kind of thing I did as a kid, oh, I don't want, and I my instinct was to like, whoa. And his dad, my bestie, said, nope, don't go anywhere near him. If he falls, we'll take him to the emergency room. Hope he doesn't, but no, leave him alone.
Yeah, I heard Jeff Bezos say one time that he and his now ex-wife, but they made a decision they'd rather have resourceful kids with 9 fingers than kids with 10 that weren't.
It's so funny. Yeah, that word resourcefulness, that's the key thing. And resourcefulness is predicated on a mindset that I have enough resources in any given situation to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a mindset. Goes back to, your thing about, is it built in or is it acquired? And it's not genetic or cultural or racial. I mean, certain cultures and things do actually emphasize, for example, in Asian countries, I've done many studies of this, there's more belief in hard work and less in intelligence. The US kind of deifies intelligence. I think, you gotta be smart. Yeah, you need a certain minimal, but not that much, actually.
Mm-hmm.
You
actually have a bone to pick against logic. And I've heard that you speak on that before. Do you mind talking about this? And you especially from a chess master to breaking the code on the SATs to breaking the code in financial markets, you seem, I would say, okay, this on paper, this is going to be a very quantitative, logical individual. And yet you'll talk about magic and the magic between people, delight, serendipity, more in person than I would ever expect someone with your acumen to talk about it. And specifically, you also deride logic a little bit. Do you mind telling listeners about a little on your opinion on logic?
So this is so important to success in life, and that one of my favorite quotes, G.K. Chesterton, who is an essayist and arguably one of the greatest, wittiest essayists ever, he said, "Truth can be found by logic only after it has first been found without it." And so, heck, Einstein talked about that. He said you kind of feel things. He talked actually about his body, his kinesthetic. It was a felt sense. Me too. I process more in my body than my head. People think I'm logical. I'm actually not. So to arrive at things intuitively first, then you can work backwards and construct a logic and go, oh, now I see the logic of that. But the aha moments, like the breakthroughs, like Bezos, creating Amazon, or anybody, whether the breakthrough is artistic or scientific or anything, first comes about a gift from heaven. You just whoa, you get some insight, and then you work that insight to death. And I say that because you can learn to cultivate your unconscious and to rely more on that than logic. So there's a dude, Julian Jayne.
And just, I want to chat about Julian, but I did you have to unlearn that at a certain point? Did you intuitively know that at 14, at 24, at 29?
I always knew it.
Really?
I always knew it.
You always had this sensitivity to the intuitive side.
Yeah, because all my great ideas popped into my head. Like my original insight for cracking the SAT literally just popped into my head with my very first student. I talked about this with Tim Ferriss. But anyway, so I've always known this. The gifts in my life have always really come out of the blue. And what I've recently learned the last Wow. Last 5 years is they don't have to come out of the blue. You can engineer them. And so Julian Jaynes was a professor of psychology at Princeton. And he wrote a book. It's going to sound like a mouthful. The Origins of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. It sounds like a mouthful, like an academic mouthful.
This audience can handle it, yeah.
Yeah. It is one of the most lucid books ever written. And I read that when it came out. Golly, I was a teenager. I was still in high school. And I read that book. And his thesis is mind-blowing. So he argued, and he had lots of evidence for it. And again, this is a book that is so lucid without any academic jargon whatsoever. Even though bicameral, that just means bicameral means two chambers, like your left-right brain. And so his thesis that he argued throughout the book, and again, lots of data for this, is that human consciousness is relatively recent in human history. So right now, you're conscious that you and I are having a conversation, right? You're probably not conscious in this very second that your hands are together, right? Mm-hmm. Now that I pointed out, you go, oh yeah, so they are. We've all had experiences when we're driving a car for a long period of time, right? Driving along, and all of a sudden we have this experience. Whoa, I've been driving for the last 15 minutes and I don't remember driving.
Oh, I can read a book and be 10 minutes into reading the book and also realize, wait, I'm 10 minutes into working through a problem in my head, but my mouth is moving and I'm reading out the book, but completely, not there.
Yeah. So that startled, like, whoa, I've been driving for the last 15 minutes. In fact, I remember stopping, I remember turning, but I don't remember being conscious of any of it. Or you can be walking down the street with holding a bag of groceries. And at no point does you let go of the bag, right? You're just holding on to it. You're not thinking about it. You just are. So I say that as a distinction between being unconscious and conscious, right? And when we're unconscious today, it's just a matter of, now I'm conscious, right? So he argues that that consciousness is relatively recent in human history. And he said he dated it through his studies and sort of anthropological studies, art, ancient writings and such, that consciousness developed in human beings 3,000 years ago. You got to let that land, because he said, I know what that means. It means I am claiming that the pyramids were built by people who were not conscious. And he said, that's exactly what I'm saying. Think about that. They had developed trigonometry, engineering, things that to this day we can't figure out. And they were not conscious at all during the process. When you drive,
like a bear climbing for honey, they were just operating on it.
Read the book. Okay. I'm just saying. So how were they able to do those things, not being aware of what the hell they were doing? Like when you're driving a car, most of the time you're conscious. And even when you realize in those startled moments, whoa, I've been driving the last 30 minutes. Thank goodness I didn't get into an accident. And so our unconscious abilities are extraordinary. Logic is pretty damn recent in human history, right? It can be traced back to, just after Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, say this is 2,500 years ago.
Damn.
And not that long. Mm-hmm. And they were doing pretty amazing things without it. And so everything in our education system and everything we're taught to do is through logic and thinking about things. And whereas in fact, the real gifts, the breakthroughs, are done through our unconscious. And then our conscious minds go, oh, and then we figure it out. Niels Bohr, the great physicist, one of the greatest ever, was chastising a younger colleague. And he said, no, you're not thinking, you're just being logical. It's easy to be logical. I mean, come on. It's a lot harder to think beyond that. And logic, such as we use, is kind of trivial. Some basic syllogisms and, A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C kind of thingy. And, various laws of converse relationships and stuff, some basic fallacies. It's all kind of trivial. Mm-hmm. And whereas real thinking goes beyond that. And we can train ourselves to do that. And so much of that is unconscious.
I just want to underscore that quote. You're not thinking, you're just being logical. That's a profound shift in perspective on thinking.
On thinking, people go off to get an MBA, do case studies and analysis and stuff. None of those skills are going to give you the breakthroughs. None of them.
On quotes, what are, and this is getting into some of the playing some of your classics, but for this audience, I think they will appreciate it. What are some of what are the 4 quotes you live by, and maybe they've grown over the years, but what are some of the quotes that are near and dear to you to the point where you live by them?
In my life, I've tried to reduce everything myself to a few rules, and like, here's one: if you're not getting the results you want, change what you're doing. So I'm not going to cite my quotes. I'll cite those of my heroes, And so one of them is, this is so important for your audience, really for everybody. Charlie Munger said, take a simple idea and take it seriously. That's a secret to success at anything. Take a simple idea and take it seriously. Now, what constitutes a simple idea? In and of itself, Charlie could have written a book. And what taking it seriously means, also he could have written a book on. Like that one statement, you could develop an entire curriculum around, right? Find a simple idea, take it seriously. And look at any of the great business successes and others. They took a simple idea, or even in sports achievement. You take a simple idea and you work it to death. And in diving deep, Josh Waitzkin has talked a lot about this, about deep dives into whatever you're doing. And the best in any field, I don't care what the domain is, the gulf between the best and the second best, it's orders of magnitude. The gulf between number 1 in the world and number 2 in the world, I don't care what the domain is more than between number 2 and number 200. They're just on another planet. And there's a writer, Raymond Chandler, who wrote detective novels in the 30s and at the Maltese Falcon and other things. And he said that one of his teachers said, don't study the first raters. And don't study them. You won't know how they got their effects. Mm-hmm. Study the second raters. Of course, we try to emulate the best, but that's one. So quote number 1. Quote number 2. I got to think about this.
As you think, that is, although it'll be hard while I talk, but that's taking simple ideas seriously is so hard. Why is there such an attraction to complexity?
It's so funny. So Steve Jobs said, simplicity is so hard, but once you get there, you can move mountains, right? It's so hard because the world is so complex, so many possibilities. And anything I've ever said, it's always real simple. And I was asked by a guy, very, 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 very successful dude, in the early days of the Princeton Review. He said, so what's the principle behind the Princeton Review? And I said, easy questions have easy answers, and hard questions have hard answers. And he went, oh. He had no idea the thinking that went into that, right? And people and again, like Buffett's 2 rules of investing. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Now, if I tell you that, or anybody who's ever heard that, it sounds pretty simplistic, right? Okay, Warren, thanks a lot for that tip. Never lose money. Never forget that. Okay, thanks. And they go on to other things. But he just gave you the secret to his success. But it's going to take a lot of thinking to unpack that, right? Because everybody goes, well, of course I'm not trying to lose money. I'm trying to make it. So Warren, how do you make money? And he said, I just told you, don't lose it. Now the brilliance behind that, the genius, the utter genius behind that, really I could talk for hours on that one point.
And that operative word of never.
Right, never. And because if that's your focus, not losing money, it forces you to do many, 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 many things.
Just literally as an investor, just hearing that word never lose money.
Yeah.
God, that is 20 times the work, 20 times the thought. It is.
Yeah. It's like, wow. Well, I'm going to get to other quotes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes, please.
I'll give you, because I don't know if I can say like the foremost, but I'll tell you things that really pop out at me that really made an impression. I was 16 years old. No, I was 17. And I was with Bobby Fischer. And we were at Grossinger's, which is an old resort, kind of like they used to, remember the movie Dirty Dancing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we went out off the property because he was preparing for the Spassky match.
The World Championships, yeah.
Went off property and 72. And we went up property because there's no room service. It was like 11:30 at night. And there was a diner. It was open, like 24-hour little diner. And there was we went there and ordered some food. And we had cash on us, but only $1.25. We were debating what 3 songs, because again, this is before your time, they used to have jukeboxes, 3 songs for $0.25. And we both loved Motown songs, so really it was just debating which of the 3 Motown songs we wanted to play. And he stopped and he said, Adam, you're probably learning about my chess right now, because you can't separate my views on music from my views on chess. And he was not a philosophical guy, ostensibly. And he said that kind of casually. And so these many years later, wow. Many, many years later, it still sticks with me that in any domain, like everything is interlinked.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And another thing, and I cited this on Tim Ferriss. He said, "Adam, what's the best piece of advice you ever got?" And I just sold my interest in the Princeton Review. I was in my early 30s, wondering what do I do next. And these two older, very successful, hyper successful Wall Street guys were going to give me advice, what to do next. And one of them said, "Ball bearings, Adam. Go into ball bearings." And he saw the look on my face. He said, "Okay, hear me out." He said, "Everybody," I'm citing this in particular because of your audience.
Please.
He said, "If you go to Wall Street, like, you know, we know you went to Wharton and everything. You know." He said, "But if you go to Wall Street," he said, all the great ideas have already been thought of. There are a lot of smart, you know, dudes all fighting it out. By the way, I now, in retrospect, disagree with that comment that all the great ideas have been thought on Wall Street. But anyway, he said, "But ball bearings, who thinks about ball bearings? Right? Who thinks about number 2 pencils?" Nobody. They're perfectly fine. So those overlooked areas that are so basic, they have not had their Thomas Edison, but heck, they have not had their Tesla. Tesla was the genius, but anyway, they've not had the breakthroughs. They've not had their Stephen Jobs, right? Or their Bezos, or their Musk, you know? And so it really stuck with me, again, these many years later.
So did you take from that there are all of these overlooked areas that?
Well, there are countless overlooked areas. Heck, it doesn't matter. Ice cubes. Pick something that nobody thinks about and take it seriously.
What
right?
What is an example of that in application in your 30s or in the coming years that you said, I'm gonna...
Actually, I went into AI back then, you know, and this was in the early days of AI. No one was in it back then. Really, if you had talked to a computer scientist and they said, "Hey, Adam, what you up to?" I said, "Oh, I'm really getting into AI now." And they said, "What the hell are you doing that for?" And it's because the state of technology back then, again, this is before your time, the chips, I don't know, were like 100,000 times slower than they are today. Or whatever, 10,000 Moore's law, you know, over the last 25, 30 years. And so to run neural net models back then, that today you could run in a second, would take a week or longer. So the iterative process was really slow. And, you know, I disagreed with the premise on basic, because then I went into investing, well, advising, and thinking about markets, just really basic stuff. Anyway, so the last thing I want to share, and again, because of your audience and is a conversation I had with my father. And when I was 12, and this is super important. It's not really a quote, it's an anecdote, but it'll go to your founders and everything. And I, mind you, what I'm about to share is a memory that I only had about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, this memory pops into my head out of nowhere of this time of a conversation I had with my father when I was 12. And this is so important for all your listeners. And so it was a beautiful spring day, or early summer. It was a weekend. I can't remember whether it was a Saturday or Sunday. And I was walking with my father, and I was 12. And I was telling him how much I hated school. I hated school because the curriculum was what they told you, right? And I went to the best schools ever, but I always hated it. I hated school, always. And because I didn't like doing the homework. And sometimes
I hate homework. I still tell my wife at 34, I still tell my wife probably once every 3 months, I'm so glad I don't have to do homework.
Yeah, well, I just didn't. I just flat out refused. And whenever they had a test, I would ace it, and they'd go, "Oh, I guess we have to pass the kid." So I was talking about how much I hated school. So my father, with whom I could have, really, I would have philosophical conversations for hours and hours and hours. So he asked me, so what are you going to do about it? So here I am, is many years later. What are you going to do about it? And not, so he was asking me as a philosophical question, Adam, you're in a situation you don't like. You kind of have to be there. So what are you going to do about it? Again, not is a philosophical question. Like, so what are you going to do? Like, he didn't mean like do, but what attitude shift? You're going to have to come around this. So again, I only had this memory 3 years ago. And I said in an offhand way, I said, I don't know, maybe one day I'll start my own school. I didn't cite that as one day I'm going to start my own school. I didn't say it like that. I just said, I don't know, maybe one day I'll start my own. I was an introvert back then. Like throughout, even by high school, there were people that had never seen me speak. Like I was very introverted. And I certainly had no, back then, entrepreneurial, like, oh, I'm going to start a school. I had zero interest in that. I didn't like school. It'd be like saying, I hate food. What are you going to do about that? I don't know. Maybe one day I'll start my own restaurant.
Well, and there's a lot,
wait.
there's a lot in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I want to let that land. And 12 years later, I started the Princeton Review. I don't remember, so I didn't remember that. I never remember recollection of that experience till a few years ago. And I cite that because I'm going to lay down as a truth for men. I don't know if it is true for women, but I know for guys. Sometime before the age of 13, you will have declared some profound statement about what you want to do in the world. Before the age of 13. Why that's so key is 13, you've entered puberty, you've discovered girls, you start to do things for other reasons. Mm-hmm. But there's a purity before then of just what speaks to your soul.
Yeah.
And so not by coincidence, Buffett, when he was 12, middle of World War II, and we haven't still escaped the Depression, and his father took Warren to New York City on a business trip. Right? Warren grew up in Omaha and goes to the big city. And they go do various things, Empire State Building, probably, I don't know, Statue of Liberty, whatever. And his father takes him to the New York Stock Exchange, little 12-year-old Warren. And Warren revered his father. And when he left, he told his dad, one day I'm going to become the richest man in the world so that I can give it all away. Think about that. Little 12-year-old Warren said, I'm going to become the richest man in the world in order to give it away. Mm-hmm. At 12. And I'm sure yourself, if you look back, you may not think of it now. Remember, I just had that memory. There's some experience. You may not have said it to someone. You may have just had the thought that it's not about the world and proving anything to the world, but just it springs from the innocence of childhood. I'm going to do that. This is who I am. So I don't know with women, maybe it's earlier, might be earlier. I don't know, because they mature faster than dudes. So but I think it's similar. I would lay it down for sure sometime. And so their relationship to the world and just how they're going to express themselves in the world. without trying to prove anything. Like right by 13, I want to become a great swimmer, so I get the cheerleaders.
Right. So there's something very interesting about the age at 6, 7, 12. The world is telling you belong. You're still in incubation. You don't need to worry about anything. 13, 15, 19, 22. The world's saying like, hey, get your act together, because you're actually on probation on whether you actually belong in this community until you get your act together. But yeah, I mean, this podcast is called Below the Line. And so the beneath the surface thinking that's going through my head is, when I was 6, 7, and 8, I would enter these drawing contests. I loved drawing, loved art.
I had no idea.
And you wouldn't have any idea if you saw me in my 20s. But I realized when I was 30 that I didn't meet a single artist, professional artist, till I was about 24. Growing up in Dallas, Texas, never met a musician. The only artists I knew of were those in the textbooks. Never met a musician, a painter, a sculptor. Never met a single artist until I was 24, a professional artist. Even where I went to college, it was just, there was no, I think that they had existed maybe a few years older or different circles, but never met them, never had a conversation. And when I was 30, I remember having this kind of reflection on, when I was 6, I wanted to be an artist. And in Dallas, Texas, the roles off the shelf were real estate, doctor, lawyer, oil and gas, and then wildcatter, exactly. Or number 5 was entrepreneur. And that was, and I only really realized this 10 years into building things, oh shit, that was the pragmatic, socially acceptable version of art that I could pursue, and that I really resonated when I would speak with other entrepreneurs when I was 15 or 22. And it is that artistic creation, this blank canvas and something new appearing, that I was somehow written in my DNA, and I figured out a way towards that somehow.
Yeah, it's in your DNA, and even if you go on to other things, I've long since left the education space, but even now, and I can't help but want to share, and it's not my field, but to share whatever I've learned, and really everything can be reduced pretty simply down to a handful of rules. And life. It's pretty damn simple, actually. I forget who said, might have been Bruce Lee, might have been this Japanese philosopher, Suzuki. He said, to the beginner, there are many possibilities. To the master, but a few. And if you reduce life down to a few kind of simple principles, you just apply those endlessly. Because life is so complicated and complex. It's not the same thought, right? And both complicated and complex and shifting, to go back to Wonderland.
Right.
So you need a few orienting principles.
Who are the philosophers and or spiritual teachers that you have found over the years you've drawn the most from or drawn towards?
Yeah. So Buffett and Munger, because everything they talk about investing is true of life. Buffett and Munger, Bruce Lee. Hold on. I gotta think about that. I know there are a few others. It's not dawning on me right now.
This is something I really do want you to take some time with, because it's.
Yeah. So let me. Buckminster Fuller. The German philosopher Schopenhauer.
What are some things that drew you towards Schopenhauer or Fuller?
Well, I'll give you my favorite quote of Schopenhauer's: all truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed.
Hmm.
Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident.
Mm-hmm.
And with an entrepreneurial venture, same thing. I'd say that's true of entrepreneurial ventures. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. Third, well, yeah, we always saw that one coming.
You could look at COVID, a global arresting pandemic that went through those 3 stages.
Yeah. So, like, you look at Bezos, I remember the early days of Amazon, you're like, books? You're going to make any money? That's a very low margin business. Then he went into CDs. Hey, Jeff, what are you choosing these low margin businesses for? Because he's building up the infrastructure. You look at those guys, Bezos, the great thinkers entrepreneurially. I know I'm drifting away from the question you asked me.
Please go in any direction.
I'll come back to it. Yeah, I'll come back to it. Because ours is an parkour, right? We're free forming here, right? Mm-hmm. And so the genius of an entrepreneur is to think of the ecosystem that's around it. So Thomas Edison, who, I think one of the great crimes in the 20th century was just marginalizing and crushing Tesla. One of the great, wow, imagine how far we'd be ahead as a species if Tesla had actually been acknowledged and encouraged instead of crushed by Edison. Anyway, but Edison he didn't invent the light bulb. He did not. But what he did invent was Con Edison. And so Edison realized a light bulb, well, that's really nice, but I got to get these in houses, which means I got to have the houses wired. And then I got to get electricity to those houses. The light bulb was trivial. In fact, lots of people had worked on it. And actually, so he didn't really invent the light bulb whatsoever, but he did invent Con Edison, the ecosystem around it. That, I'll never forgive him for Tesla, but okay, kudos on that, the ecosystem. And you think about Musk, who recognizes the ecosystem. A lot of people don't know, like around the electric car. You're going to have an electric car, you're going to have charging stations. I don't know if you know this, a lot of people don't. But he threw open his patents. He said, anyone who wants to use my patents can, right? And why? Because he wanted other people in the space so that they would work on creating the charging stations and everything.
Increase the demand, yeah, and always.
Demand. But not just the demand for cars, but to increase the infrastructure for it.
Right.
Now, Bezos also, these are really strategic thinkers, right? They're thinking decades ahead about the infrastructure that's required to do their things. And in one of the few missteps of Bezos, he was an early backer of the Segway. Remember the Segway? Mm-hmm. And there was a famous meeting with Bezos and I think even Stephen Jobs was there. A few other guys, a few other titans. And Dean Kamen, right, shows the Segway. And Bezos was like, oh my God, this is great. He's gonna, he rides around in it. Poor guy.
We're gonna leave that in there for the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Below the line.
It's perfect. So he may knock on the window wanting me for something, but I just ignore him. So
so Bezos says this is amazing.
Change everything. But they didn't think about the ecosystem. And the Segways are pretty damn cool. And Dean Kamen's one of the really great inventor, amazing dude. And but they didn't think, well, how are we actually going to ride these around in cities? Right? Mm-hmm. We're not gonna have separate lanes. How are we gonna? They didn't think that through. In their excitement around the Segway, they forgot Segway is going to occur. That was in the details. The ecosystem around it. What are sidewalks going to be like? What are traffic laws?
How as my mind's kind of thinking through this, as I I've never thought about this before, the understanding of the ecosystem and the importance placed on it. You could easily say that Musk and his tweeting is to engender this ecosystem, feed this ecosystem. Even buying a 1.5 billion of Bitcoin is almost like, let me co-opt or graft this other massive ecosystem into what we're trying to do with Tesla and SpaceX.
Yeah, I agree in that respect. Got to be careful a little bit, because his tweets are always self-interested.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I was gonna go with that.
By the way, I'm a great admirer of him.
Well,
nothing kudos to him.
And yeah, I think he's barred from being the chairman of his own company because of his tweets. But I did want to, in that line of thinking, you don't give stock advice. This isn't stock advice, on a podcast. But do you take that perceptivity, that ability to understand the ecosystem into account when you're looking at a company like Tesla and say, yeah, it's an electric car. Yes, it has not produced nearly as many cars as GM or XYZ. This valuation is out of whack, but holy shit, there is a leader that understands this dark energy, the dark matter of building a company like this.
So just so people who may not be familiar with particle physics, dark energy is not like the Sith Lord.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, or dark energy, right?
Yeah. It's like the 74% of the universe we can't see, but there's something there.
Goes below the surface. What's going on below the surface, right? Which is your theme, right? Thematic theme. There's always something going on. Just like any of the great quotes, all wisdom is simple. When you hear it, you go, yeah, obvi.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't understand it because you haven't gone below the surface. It takes years to explore below the surface. And so I don't ever get involved with individual stocks, ever. Just what I do, my circle of competence is I would say predicting, but anticipating global trends before they happen, weeks or months before. But like on interest rates or maybe a sector like banking stocks. But I'm not going to get into should you buy Goldman or JP Morgan or Wells Fargo. I don't actually care intellectually. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I can't compete at that level because I'm not an analyst. Like I don't care about it. Let other people do that. Yeah. So I don't deal with that. But okay, funny meme story. Back in the day on stocks, and got to be careful with memes and tweets. Mm-hmm. So back in the day, this is like 1870-ish, something like that. And Cornelius Vanderbilt was the richest man in America. In today's money, he'd be worth about 500 billion. And so Cornelius Vanderbilt went to the pastor of, I think it was St. Patrick's Cathedral on a Sunday after service, and says, buy railroad stocks. And about a month later, railroad stocks had collapsed. And Cornelius Vanderbilt went up to the pastor and gave him a check for, I don't know, like $1 million. And the pastor, well, thank you. What's this for? He said, for the railroad stocks. And the pastor said, well, Mr. Vanderbilt, I know you gave me, the best advice. And who knows railroad stocks better than you? Because that's one of the ways he made his money, right? And he said, I knew the risks. I'm a big boy. You don't have to make me whole on that. And Vanderbilt said, well, the thing is, I knew you would tell everybody else to buy railroad stocks. I needed to unload my positions. I was selling and I needed a lot of buyers. So he tweeted to the pastor, buy railroad stocks, because he was selling them. And, the canny Cornelius Vanderbilt, there was no SEC back then. And so you got to be careful with all public statements of people who are playing, because they're playing games on multiple levels. I'm not in no way am I saying that Musk or anybody who tweets, prominently about stuff is doing so as cannily as Cornelius Vanderbilt. And even Musk has been, scolded by the SEC and his own board of directors. Elon, buddy, can't be doing that. And but just to, gotta, again, below the surface. What's he saying and what's really going on here? Got to view the context. And we talk about, well, not here, but like second order thinking, which is going below the surface, right? Got a simple statement, never lose money. Now go below the surface and think that through. Take it seriously, right? To go back to Munger's great quote. And by the way, that's what you do, right? That's below the surface. Simple idea. That's the surface. Now below. Now you gotta, that's where the gold is, because no one drops below the surface.
Well, then I'll tell listeners the best advice. I think in venture investing, it's why I say it's 20 times the work to never lose your money in venture investing. But the best advice I ever got in venture investing was Peter Thiel telling me over lunch one time. He said the biggest mistake I ever made investing was missing out on Facebook's Series B. And I decided not to invest because I thought, okay, I'm an early stage investor. So that's where I invest. Someone else will do the B, C, and so on. And he thought the valuation was too high. And he realized venture investing is all about capital density. And that's like his simplifying statement. It is all about capital density in the winners. So that's the second part.
Well, but that wasn't a mistake. Not a mistake whatsoever. He's sticking within his circle of competence. That's where his edge is.
Well, it's at that time, but he did the math. He said, I can make $100 million bets, 20 in a row, go south, go to nothing, and it would not come close to what I missed out on by not doing the Series B of Facebook.
I guess with respect to Peter, no, I'm going to disagree.
All right, yeah.
So Munger and Buffett have never used leverage. And, right, they grew up in the Depression. We're not leverage. Remember, never lose money. And leverage increases the odds you're going to lose money. So one day, just he was curious. Munger said he wanted to see what Buffett and he would be worth today if they had put on just basic leverage, the kind of leverage everybody uses and doesn't even think about. Not over leverage, just basic kind of leverage. And he estimated they would be worth 5x what they are today. 5x. If they'd used leverage, but they never did. And that wasn't a mistake. They stuck to their process, right? Yeah, you just stick to your process. If you look back on things, any number of things, you go, oh, that was a mistake. No, it would have been a mistake because if you went outside your circle of competence, if you violated a rule, well, you probably would have done that lots. Yeah, you missed out on that. And you missed out on a lot of huge losses. All he sees is what he missed out on. He doesn't see how many, catastrophes he didn't get involved in because he's stuck to his, his domain.
All right, listeners, that was part 1 with Adam. Next week, we're going to drop part 2. And in part 2, we cover all kinds of things like his his interaction with Bobby Fischer as one of his close friends for many years. I had no idea how famous Bobby Fischer, the chess master, was, but during the height of the Cold War and during the height of him being the best chess player in the entire world, he was the most famous American. So we talk about that. We talk about chess against the Russians, all of that and more with the brilliant mind that is Adam Robinson.